Good morning, everybody. Okay, I want to
Boker Tov.
Boker Tov. Welcome, everybody. We're very excited today. Virtual tours by Peter Abelow on the backstories of Machon Ayalon. Peter, welcome.
Thank you, Judy.
I am
Good
muting
morning,
everyone.
everybody. Okay. Hi, everyone. Nice to see all of you. This was retired from Keshet a number of years ago. It's actually almost over 3 years already. I always loved Machon Ayalon, and I went to them. I said, "Are you looking for guides?" And sure enough, they had, I didn't even know this, they had a cadre of volunteer guides that were coming in on usually a one-day-a-week basis, and I became a guide at Machon Ayalon. And so I'm happy to be able to share with you some of the story of Machon Ayalon. The stories sometimes that we don't even get to share with the people that go through our tours because we're so time limited. Here we go. So as I said, this is my first attempt at a PowerPoint presentation. I'm going to begin the story in a rather interesting way. The staff of Machon Ayalon does Hishtalmiyot from time to time, and they took us about a year ago to TAS Industries, the IMI, Israel Military Industries, which has their manufacturing plant for bullets up near Natzrat Illit, which just changed names recently. I don't remember the new name, but at the time it was still Natzrat Illit. And it was a very exciting visit because we got to see what the Machon Ayalon has, come over here, has evolved into in modern times. The old factory, which managed to get produced between 12,000 and 15,000 bullets a day at its maximum in 1945 to 1948, is today modern IMI producing over 1 million bullets a day and considered, at least according to their PR, some of the best bullets in the world, and has huge international markets. Over 50% of the bullets being produced in Israel today are not being used in Israel. I mean, obviously they're supplying the IDF, but they're being purchased by many, many other countries the quality that's being produced. For me, what was fascinating that I was walking in the door and seeing in the entrance lobby of the modern IMI up in Natzrat, pictures of Machon Ayalon. And it suddenly dawned on me that the story of Machon Ayalon is not just the story of 1945 to 1948, but indeed was the origins of what eventually became Israel Military Industries. And this is its most modern version. So that's our theme today. The development of IMI, of Israel Military Industries, beginning with the Ayalon Institute, as it's called, on Kibbutz Hill in Rehovot. The story of the bullet factory, secret bullet factory, literally under the eyes of the British during the years 1945 to 1948. Where can I find my cursor? Here we go. Okay. So I decided to do this in a guiding style, and maybe I was lucky when I became a guide. We made Aliyah in 1990, and I had led trips. I was an educator in America and had led school trips and synagogue trips, and a number of the people who were our guides back then, including I say Yitzhak. Well, actually, I think, yeah, Yitzhak, you were the guide of my Baltimore trip, right? It was the last trip I took before Aliyah, correct? In 1990. But many of the guides that we had as guides back in, when I was leading trips for the school or for the synagogue, are people that became my colleagues. And I always had this, I was enamored by your knowledge and your passion of Israel and your ability to share that story. And when I saw the ad for the tour guide course, our first year here in Israel in 1991, took the course, was accepted, which was itself a bit of a miracle. And then it was only offered in Hebrew by Masrat Tayrut at the university in Yerushalayim. But I have the benefit of bringing to the touring the years of education, of experience as being as an educator, as a teacher, a math teacher, as well as a high school principal. And I've always tried to bring that both to my own guiding as well as to the guides that when I was the head of Keshet, the guides that worked with me to help them become better guides. So I'm going to develop today in the same format. Number one, guiding should, of course, involve giving over information and knowledge, sharing knowledge, giving over facts. But it's much more than that. Good guiding, as we all know, is telling a story, is weaving the facts and the information into a narrative, which is much, much more captivating, unless you have a very professional audience that's really listening to, wants on an intellectual level just to learn facts and information. What makes a good guide captivating and engaging is the ability to weave stories about that information. And I hope to do that as well this morning. And frequently educators know that when you plan a lesson, you want to know where you're going. What's ultimately your final objective? Is it simply knowledge? Is it simply stories? Or is there some message, some final lesson that you want to leave with your class or with your group at the end? And I want to do that as well and leave you with a message, which today I think resonates from the place which many of us visit frequently with our groups, called Machon Ayalon. It's funny, I just had a thought saying this when I was kind of planning this last night, and I was looking for a picture. I know it's somewhere in my 10,000 pictures on my phone. I couldn't find it, but to me, the guide of a guest guide or a local guide that we used to watch was Tali at Independence Hall. I'm not sure how many of you remember Tali. She, unfortunately, a woman in probably her 50s, had passed away a number of years ago, tragically, due to cancer. But she had, I think, was the best example. I used to watch her and say, oh my God, she's just amazing how she would be able to information, tell stories, and leave the people there at Independence Hall with a very powerful message that place conveys. She also had the capacity of changing the story for the crowd. In other words, the ability to guide the same place for a birthright group, and for a Jewish group with background, and for a non-Jewish group with a totally different background, and to be able to mold her presentation to make it appropriate for the group that she was guiding. In any event, I'm going to try to follow that pattern and implement all of these today in our presentation. So I began by saying that the story of Machon Ayalon actually extended into the future, and today already in the 21st century, we see its most current Gilgul in the modern IMI, but most people think that the story of Machon Ayalon really goes back to, oops, what did I do there? I did something I didn't want to do, and I can't find my cursor again. Here it is. So look what I discovered, that, no, right.
You have to share your presentation. We can't see it. On the bottom, there's a button that says share, screen share, with a green arrow. On the bottom, it says share screen with an arrow.
We could all, we could all see the presentation.
I can see it.
We all see it.
I see
Well,
it.
I don't see it.
I see it.
Okay, so right now I have a chart that has, it's actually from the book of Machon Ayalon, which says Ayalon Institute Kibbutzim Rehovot chronological chart. Are you all seeing that? Just nod. Yeah. Okay, good. So
Yeah.
you know, most of us who are all familiar as guides with Machon Ayalon, actually, you know what? Let me do this as a pen instead. Think of the story of Machon Ayalon as being over here, 1945 to 1948. Sloppily done. But the truth is, I also want to go back a little bit in time, not to this period, but the real story of Machon Ayalon really began over here. Whoops, that's not what I wanted to do. So, well, there you go. Let's go back to 1929, because the story of Machon Ayalon really began in 1929. And the truth is, when I guide, I'll frequently tell groups that the story of Machon Ayalon is not a story of 1945 to 1948. But if you really want to have the beginning of the story, go back to the year 70, when the yearning to return to the land of Israel became implanted in the hearts of what became the Jewish diaspora. And that for 2,000 years, we tenaciously clung to that dream and managed to pass it on from generation to generation. It obviously manifested itself in the late 19th century with the rise of Zionism and Theodore Herzl and the Zionist Congress, but it's all part of the backstory leading to the events of the War of Independence and, of course, the bullet factory in Rehovot and Givat Kibbutzim. In any event, the immediate story really begins in 1929, because in 1929, the fledgling Haganah understood that we couldn't really rely on the British to defend us. The Haganah was founded for that purpose, called the Haganah for that purpose. And in their early meetings, they also realized that they would need to either procure or manufacture weapons and ammunition. And so the initial efforts, which manifested themselves over 20 years later in 1945, began in 1931 when this dream took its first step, and the Haganah decided to send a young engineer by the name of Yehezkel Baram to Germany to learn the craft of bullet making. Now, each of these sentences is rather amazing because I look at it, as you well know, each sentence is itself a whole story of why this particular individual was picked, how they got him into Germany. It's a story of intrigue and false papers and clandestine operation and using protectia. And in any event, Baram lands a job in a bullet factory in Germany, in Berlin. And he spends the next year and a half learning the trade. By the time 1938, when the machinery that makes its way to Machon Ayalon is actually purchased by another Haganah operative named Yehuda Arazi, Baram is an expert, and indeed he is the person that accompanies the shipment of the bullets of the machines back to Israel in 1938, and that's the next piece here. Let's see if I can't find my cursor against the white. That's the problem. Let's see, here we go. Okay, I think I got it right. There we go. It's the highlighter, right? Okay, 1938, and this itself is another fascinating story. Okay, because as probably some of you know, the equipment started its journey to Israel already in 1938 on a Polish ship. Whether there was an informant on who alerted the British, or whether it was the ship captain, there are different versions. I don't think anybody really knows exactly what happened. What we do know is that the British were notified that a ship was on its way to, it wasn't Israel yet, it was Palestine, and crated in the hold of the ship were these huge crates, numbered and identified in the information that the British got, containing the machinery for the manufacturing of bullets. And this is a fascinating little bit of a sub-story here back in 1938. What you have here is a copy of the telegram. It's not an actual copy, but the text of the telegram that was sent from the British intelligence center in Yerushalayim to their operatives in Haifa and Jaffa. A reliable report says that a factory in Poland assembled 34 machines for bullet and weapons production, da, 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 da. The machines turn out bullets, etc. The machines are packed in crates on this boat. The numbers of the crates are conveyed in the original. An engineer, Walter, named Tulik or Dulik, has gone to Eretz Yisrael. Turns out that this Walter is the same Yecheskel Baram who went to Germany back in 1931, who was accompanying the equipment on its way back to Israel. If you catch Walter, hold him and ask Intelligence Center for further instructions. And obviously the intent of the British was to meet the ship when it docked at Haifa and confiscate the crates of the machinery. When the ship did dock in Haifa, first of all, it was 3 days late. Nobody quite understood the delay. And the British met the captain, of course, thanked him for his diligence, thank you for letting us know this is really important information. We'd like to unload the machine, the crates with the bullet machinery. And the captain kind of scratched his head and said, what are you talking about? It was unloaded in Beirut yesterday. Fascinating story. What happened? Turns out that, and this is, I think, part of the miracle of the birth of Israel, that the miracle of Israel, that many people back in the 1930s were working for the British. Now, the British employed a lot of Arabs, as we know, but they also employed a lot of local Jews. And many of the Jews at the same time were double shifting. They had two jobs. They were members of the Haganah, and they were working for the British. So it turns out that the woman who got this cable from the ship and passed it on to her British superiors in British headquarters also sent it over to Haganah. And I love the last paragraph of this. Shai, which was the Haganah Intelligence Bureau, had the information 30 minutes after the commander of Central Intelligence received it. So the Haganah knew that the British knew 30 minutes after the British knew, which is itself just an incredible little miracle, because they were quickly able to organize an official cable to the ship to please divert and go to Beirut first and unload these boxes in Beirut. And in Beirut, they were met by British soldiers, who of course were Haganah people in British uniforms, who got the crates off the ship. And the ship then continued on its way to Haifa without the machinery, because that was safely in warehouses in Lebanon. Just one of the many, many stories which underscore how all of the planning also needed a little bit of luck as well to be able to pull this off. And so the machinery is now in Lebanon. We're back to this slide again. We're back in Lebanon. And it actually sits there from 1938 until 1945. World War II broke out. They just didn't have a way to bring it into Israel, and they had decided where to set it up. But in any event, in 1945, at the end of the Second World War, the Haganah now made the decision, and that's this section here in 1945. Right at the end of World War II, it's called in the Haganah the Year of the Bullet. That Yosef Avidar, who was then appointed the head of TASS, or Israel, evolved into Israel Military Industries, decided the time had come. And so Avidar sets in motion Judy, what's our timing, by the way? About 45 minutes?
You can talk for as long as you need to.
Okay. I'll try to keep within 35, 40 minutes, okay? The decision is made to set up a bullet factory, and as you know, they focus on a bit of a hill outside the city of Rehovot, which had already been used as a kibbutz training ground, and to set up an underground secret factory. It's right near a railroad train, which means the transportation is rather simple. It's in the Merkaz, which is very convenient in terms of logistics. It's right under the noses of the British, and as Shlomo Hillel is known to have said to the group that he interviewed about working here, and they said, "This is ridiculous, you're working right under the nose of the British." And he says, if you want to do something in the underground, you do it right under the nose of the enemy. It's less suspicious that way. They'll never suspect you. Shlomo Hillel, who was part of the original group, we'll see his picture in just a moment, had gone on, of course, to become the Speaker of the Knesset, and is the head of the Machon Ayalon Institute to this day. He's in his 90s. I think he's still alive, right? And in any event, in 1945, they decide to set up the secret bullet factory on Kibbutz Hill in Rehovot. And these are the group of Tzofim Aleph, of the first 25 young people that were, quote unquote, asked to volunteer to kind of put their lives on hold. They were in a kibbutz training program in Pardes Chana. They had hoped to be able to go and establish a kibbutz, and they were asked to now change their plans. The leaders, including Shlomo Hillel, were asked to come to Jerusalem to meet with Avidar and Haganah leaders, and presented with the option of changing their plans and doing something very vital to the interests of the Yishuv in terms of making bullets. And indeed, they agreed. And this is one of the people. His name is Avram Ashkenazi. Can you see the whole picture? Okay, I hope so, because I only see part of it because I'm seeing some of you on the side. But I had the pleasure, he was one of the 25 people in the picture we just saw a moment ago. And I had the pleasure of meeting him not long ago at Machon Ayalon. He did a video for Machon Ayalon about a year ago. He's obviously in his 90s. He is as sharp as a tack. He looks like he couldn't be a day over 70. And he's spry. He bounded up and down the ladder to the basement like a kid. And I only had about 3 or 4 minutes to talk with him. And I only had a chance to ask him one question. And I'm going to come to that question at the end because I really had a very limited time. It was in the middle of filming. But it was such a pleasure to actually meet somebody who was part of the original operation of the Machon Ayalon secret bullet making operations back in 1945 to 1948. In any event, I'm going to come back to him a little bit later with the question I asked him. They decided to set up on the kibbutz, as you well know, a whole secret factory underground. The official excuse for digging, because remember the British there and they're watching, say, hey, what are you digging? So the official excuse was a refrigeration plant for the kibbutz. Nobody seemed to ask a question. One of the amazing things about this, they moved the laundry and the bakery into place, and we'll talk about them in just a moment. But one of the amazing things about this, and think about this in terms of modern Israel, this entire plant, from the time the hole was dug to the time the concrete walls were poured and the equipment lowered down, took 21 days. Can you imagine anything getting done in this country in 21 days? But sure enough, they managed to build this entire thing in 21 or 22 days. And although it was technically operational, it took quite a few months to begin to train the people in the operations of bullet making. And so the actual bullet making didn't take place for quite a few months later, to the beginning of 1946. But already they put in place the operation and the necessary things to set up a fully operational bullet factory underground in Kibbutz Hill. So this is the view on the outside. And as many of you know, we usually begin our tour in the building over here with a lovely film. The film is a new film. Last few years, a much, much greater improvement of the old film. Tells the story rather dramatically and rather nicely. And then we move from there to the building right nearby, which is the laundry. And I want to spend a few moments on this particular slide before we go in the laundry, because when I sit with a group there, you know, every detail had to be thought of. Every possible glitch had to be anticipated. The more they were able to anticipate, the better prepared they were to deal with every potential little problem. And I think that's one of the great miracles of our existence today, the War of Independence. I actually just read a book about the Israeli Air Force, which I picked up on a tour that I led a few months ago. Fascinating book about the history of the Israeli Air Force. And there too, they talk about the War of Independence, but also 67 and also 73. And he goes in tremendous detail about how these operations, which were so successful, they didn't just happen. I didn't realize that the plans for 1967 for the attack on the morning of June 5th were already planned 4 years in advance. And they were constantly being updated as new information about the deployment in Egypt and Syria was coming in. But there was a whole office already working with tremendous detail for many years, and literally updating it every few weeks. As I said, new information came in, so that on the morning of June 5th, when the decision was taken to put the entire Air Force in the air and attack Egypt first, then go after Syria, those things had been thought out and meticulously planned with it's just an amazing thing. And our success in this country, it's even more amazing because we know our lack of planning sometimes, but how operations like this, it was indeed the attention to detail that made them successful and possible. In any event, why a laundry? So I tell my groups, it's a laundry because it's a real kibbutz, right? A kibbutz has a laundry. We're talking about Lavi or Phil. Phil, do you still have a laundry? I know you're muted, but I don't know if you still have a community laundry. But of course, many kibbutzim do. I know Lavi does. I ran a program on Lavi for many years, and the kids that were there for 3 months did their laundry in the kibbutz laundry. A laundry is a vital piece of kibbutz life. The laundry, however, was there for a number of other reasons as well, as I'm sure you know. Not only to make it look valid and to validate that it's a real kibbutz, but the laundry machine, I'm going to skip to the next slide for a moment and come back. The laundry machine, which I'm sure many of you have seen, was a very noisy machine. And part of the rationale for the laundry was to cover the noise of the very noisy machines making bullets just 4 meters below. But in order to do that, they had to run the machine almost all the time. And they discovered that no matter how many people they had picking potatoes or clipping, shoveling cow do, there just wasn't enough laundry. So somebody said, okay, well, why don't we open up a shop in Rehovot? And indeed, the kibbutz on the surface, mostly people had no idea what was going on underneath, opened up a branch of the kibbutz laundry in Rehovot, and they were doing laundry for the citizens of Rehovot, and even for a maternity hospital in Rehovot, which insisted on making life easier for the people of the kibbutz and just coming to pick up their own stuff instead of having it pick it up in Rehovot. And so they did that. Things got a little bit more complicated when the British, 200 yards away, discovered that the kibbutz had a laundry. And they were doing it commercially because the shop was in Rehovot. And so in 46 and 47 and 48, we were actually doing laundry for the British Army, which was a few meters away, just a couple of 100 meters away. And again, things became a bit more complicated when the British, in their very British accommodation, said, why should you have to schlep it to us? We will come and pick it up. And this is the last thing we wanted, British soldiers on the grounds of the kibbutz, but there was no real excuse to say no to them. And so literally when the British came, we had to shut down the entire operation for the 20 or 30 minutes, and we even made it a little bit more hospitable for them. We prepared tea and biscuits, and they sat and they schmoozed. And about 5 years ago, a British soldier who had served on the base about 200 yards away came with his family to visit Machon Ayalon. And I happened to be there that day, and I, again, had a few moments to talk with him, and these are the things that really in the experience for me. And he said, I was here dozens of times bringing laundry, and I never had the slightest suspicion there was something untoward going on right beneath my feet. But that's how effective that it was. They literally shut the operation down because the British came onto the grounds periodically, and everything looked normal and perfect to them. There are a number of other reasons for the laundry. One of them has to do with this chimney here. And you might remember that behind us in this slide is the bakery. The bakery and the laundry were specifically chosen for a number of reasons, one of which is they both have chimneys. Why should a chimney be important? Because they had to have ventilation for a totally closed operation underground. And so one of the chimneys served as intake of fresh air, one was the exhaust of fresh air, and there was a rotating system which circulated fresh air 12 times an hour, so that there was constantly a flow of fresh air coming in and out of the factory down below. And what made that possible was the choice of laundry and bakery, both of which in their natural structure employed the laundry. But of course, I think we all know that the real reason, because I'm sure many of us have done at least part of the tour of Machon Ayalon, is the laundry machine itself, because the laundry played a very, very vital role in the accessibility, as told by one of the stories, which actually, I mean, all the guides tell it. You've probably heard it. It's in the archives of the memoirs of people who were in Machon Ayalon back in the 1940s, and it has to do with a woman named Esther who was a giraffe. And there was a whole code name for many, many things that were going on. The code name for the people that did not have any idea what was going on, which was about 2/3 of the population of the kibbutz at sometimes, was giraffes. Why? Because their heads are all the way up here. They have no idea what's going on beneath their feet. Perhaps that was the reason. But Esther was a giraffe, and Esther one day had come in to do some of her hand laundry in that basin towards the back over here. Sarah, and these are real people and real names, who was in charge of the laundry and was not a giraffe, had inadvertently not locked the door, gone out to the back to hang some laundry on the lines. And just at that instant, Esther walked in, was doing her laundry. And I'm sorry I didn't do a video of this. If I'd been able to get back there, I would have employed some video, as Joe did so effectively the other day. But she turns around, as you know, this machine suddenly mysteriously begins to rise and slides over. And lo and behold, under the machine is an entry shaft to the factory down below. And she turns around, and again, the story is that she looked and she suddenly saw her friends from the kibbutz, who she thought were out in the fields or doing other things, coming out from underground, and she fainted. At that moment, Sarah came back in. She kind of realized what had happened. People are coming up from underground for lunch. It was the lunch shift. And Esther was laying out on the ground in a dead faint. Obviously, they revived Esther. They have to now figure out what to do with her. We don't shoot people. So Esther had a new job the next day. She was immediately now drafted into the team working in the factory on the theory that if you're there yourself, you have a much greater stake in preserving the secrecy of what's going on. In any event, probably the real reason for the laundry was the machine that lifted pneumatically at the push of a button. And every morning, 40 workers would assemble in the laundry, coming 2 or 3 at a time from different areas of the kibbutz, usually carrying bundles of laundry or something, so it would be less suspicious. When everybody was there, Sarah would open the machine. And this is remarkable because 40 people would get down this ladder in 90 seconds. It's remarkable because way back in the early days, I don't know if you remember, they used to let us go down this way. They don't anymore for safety reasons and insurance reasons. But in those days they did. And I would never do it with more than 15 or 20 people. And it would take me like 6 or 7 minutes to get 20 people down. And 40 people would go down in 90 seconds, like firemen, I would imagine, rip, right down into the bottom, close up the machine. And now they're making bullets for the rest of the day. This is what the ladder looks like. Going to the basement, which is I think 5 or 6 meters down below. This is the same ladder from the bottom, and the machines. So I chose personal pictures. Our family, first let's say hi to Debbie, our son Avi, whom I think some of you at least know, Avi's son Yakir, who is now serving in the IDF. Very proud of him. Just was in the Giyus, so it was just 2 or 3 weeks ago. His first cousin, our daughter's oldest son, Tanel. And we were there with our whole family, did a family tiyul of Sukkot, not in 2019, but 2018. We had about, I guess, 20 or 25 people from the family, and the extended family at Machon Ayalon that day. And we see in the background now the assembly line, which were the machines which were used in this case to make the shell casings of the bullets. I'm not going to go through the whole sipur of how we manufacture shell casings. This is the assembly line, but I do want to tell you a little bit of a cute story about the bullets. First of all, we all know from our visits to Machon Ayalon that one of the most popular souvenirs that people love to buy in Israel are these bullets on the chains. These are real bullets. They are not real bullets from Machon Ayalon. To my best of my knowledge, none of those really exist anymore. This particular bullet, and the truth is I never looked at it. I have it at home. I use it when I guide at Machon Ayalon. I never looked at it until I was beginning to prepare this presentation. But I looked at the bottom of the bullet because I've been learning more and more. So this particular bullet was produced by Israel Military Industries, no surprise there. It's a 9mm bullet. Again, no surprise there. That's what we were doing at Machon Ayalon. And this particular bullet was made for a Luger. Okay, but you notice, and again, this is rather fascinating and something I really didn't know until a week ago when I began to prepare a little bit for this, that bullets are always marked with identification at the bottom. And the bullets at Machon Ayalon were marked. Here are 2 of the people that were actually involved in the making of bullets. And this is the bottom of a Machon Ayalon bullet. It had the letter A for Ayalon, the letter E for Eretz Yisrael and the year of manufacture, 1946, 1947, or 1948. And I did a little bit more digging and I discovered, wow, the decision was a conscious decision to mark the bullets in English. They were originally going to mark them in Hebrew. And someone said, that's stupid. What if the British pick up a shell casing and they see Hebrew? They will know that there must be some sort of manufacturing of bullets going on in the Yishuv, and they'll begin to look for an underground factory somewhere. And so there was a conscious decision of the Haganah to mark, the bullets had to be marked, so they marked it with something that identified it, AE and a year, but they did it in English so that it wouldn't arouse suspicion should a shell casing ever be looked at. I thought that was just a little bit of a fascinating bit of to the extent to which they went to disguise the operation. Now, this one was really for Frankie, all right, but for all of us. I'm going to digress for a minute. I don't want to blow you away with this, okay? But this is a bit of something I saw in a news article, I don't know, about, when is the date on this? Does it have it? About a week or two ago, about the current situation, analyzing the growth rate of the virus and the equation that I circled there. Now, how do I happen to bring this in right now? So let me give you, again, the backstory of this. Since retiring, I've been guiding, a lot of guiding independently, groups, families. I've also been teaching the last 3 years in a program of American high school students through the Ramah program over at the Goldstein Youth Village of Chavat Noar Goldstein. And I've been teaching math. I've been teaching various levels of high school math, including a class this year, it's called TRI, by the way, which is what this is up here, an Algebra 2 class, and I had just finished a unit of logarithms. Now again, this is gonna be relevant in a minute, you'll see. Logarithms, for anybody, I hate to mention the word, for anybody who remembers back that far back into high school, but it's probably one of the hardest topics to teach because it's fairly abstract and theoretical, and it's one of the hardest topics to learn. And kids are always saying, why do I have to learn this? Oh my God, when are we going to finish this topic and get on to the next thing? And I actually finished the logarithm topic in the last lesson before this kid's sudden departure back to America 3.5 weeks ago. And then I saw this article and I sent it to my class. We have a WhatsApp group because we're continuing with online learning with the classes through Zoom. And I sent it to them and I said, look what I came across in an article about coronavirus, an application of logs. Because here the equation involves logarithms. And I got a whole lot of different reactions. It's a class of 11 students. First one was very cool. She was one of them who always said, why are we learning this? Who needs this stuff? And I say, somebody finds this useful. And this is even stranger than ever because as Frankie knows, this is a natural log. It's not even a normal number. It's a log to the base E, which is an irrational number, 2 point, I don't know, whatever it is. So why is this relevant to Machon Ayalon? Because when I guided Machon Ayalon, we come to the shooting range. And the shooting range was a problem that had to be solved. Any manufacturing process has to test the product to assure quality control, to assure that you're getting a product that meets the needs of the specifications. In the instance of bullets, statistics require that you test X number of bullets out of every batch. I don't know whether it's 5 out of 10,000 or whatever the numbers are, but out of that you have statistical tables and you can say, based on this testing, you can be assured that 98% of the bullets will function properly. And so testing is a very, very critical part of the manufacturing process. And at Machon Ayalon, that meant testing the bullets in a shooting range, actually shooting the bullets and seeing that they had the proper velocity and the proper trajectory, that all of the things that they should be doing in terms of performance were being indeed happening. But you can't set up a shooting range. That's the last thing you can do up on the surface. The kibbutz people is full of giraffes. They're the British 200 yards away. Sten guns make a lot of noise. This is the gun that was being used for, is the Israeli-made Sten gun, which was an Israeli version of the British Tommy gun. It was the main weapon in the early going of the War of Independence. And so they had to figure out how to do this in the factory down below. And so, as some of you may know, back in the far corner, they set up a shooting gallery, which is only 4 meters long. And they used, look at this, physics, math, and all of a sudden, because I got this as a math teacher, like, well, who needs this stuff? So you never know, right? But luckily, somebody in the Haganah planning knew physics and knew math and said, you know what, we can do this in 4 meters. And again, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but you can see there are 2 discs here, which are calibrated. The next slide, I tried to do calibration. I couldn't get black lines. all right? But it's calibrated with angles all the way around the disc, 360 degrees. So going back a second. So actually, I didn't have to go back because I planned to go forward, right? There we are again. There we are. And so these two discs are calibrated discs with angles. You can see the hole right over here under my laser pointer in the first disc. These discs would spin at a known rate of rotation. We know the distance between them. And so when a bullet was shot, you can calculate from where the hole is in the first disc and the hole is in the second disc, the speed of the bullet. The difference between the angles that are marked on the two discs will give you the velocity, as I said, also the trajectory, and now we are able to underground test the bullets and to actually make sure that they're performing the way they're supposed to. But even this involved challenges because it still makes a lot of noise. A gun, no matter how you do it, it's still going to make a lot of noise. And so even this had to be carefully thought about. You have people from the kibbutz up on the surface, a few hundred yards away. You have gunpowder, by the way, 20 yards away. You have the British 200 yards away. And so they would time the shooting of the gun to the passing of the trains nearby. And whenever a train roared by, there would be a light, the emergency light, which would be flashed to notify the people down below to shut everything down occasionally if there was an emergency or quiet was necessary. It would also be used to say, okay, now you can test the bullets. And as the train roared by, they would test 2 or 3 bullets quickly. And by the time the noise of the train had died down, so had the use of the shooting gallery, and only the people down below had heard it. There was no noise. The train was so great that they never heard people up above what was going on just below the surface. And so even here, they had to think carefully how to pull off this operation. Now, in a way, that kind of brings us to the end of Machon Ayalon, but it doesn't, because we know that Machon Ayalon was the mainstay of the War of Independence. I always tell my groups at the beginning, I want them to understand very clearly that our preparations in the 1920s and the 1930s, and especially in the 1940s for the War of Independence, was being prepared for a war which nobody wanted. And if nobody wanted a war before the Holocaust, certainly nobody wanted a war after the Shoah. It's the last thing the Jewish people wanted and needed. Yet Ben-Gurion and the leadership of the Yishuv understood very clearly that we better be prepared for what we don't want. And he really believed that it was inevitable. If you read his memoirs, I think Ben-Gurion really believed that there was no alternative. And so we had to be prepared for this war. And now, in the last part then, and so I always make sure that I end with my groups in Machon Ayalon by giving them at least a little bit of a glimpse of why this was so important to the Jewish people and what were some of the basic principles on which Israel was founded. And for that, I turn to the Independence Declaration. You're all familiar with it. I'm actually more interested in, you're reading this. I'm going to go to the next page. I'm more interested, not there yet, in these 2 pieces over here. I want people to understand that back in 1948, now again, these are the ideals of Israel's independence. Have we lived up to everything in our Declaration of Independence? Far from it. We have much to still do in this country, but these are the ideals stated by our founding fathers and mothers. In the midst of wanting aggression, call upon the Arab inhabitants of the state of Israel to return to the ways of peace and play their part in the development of the state with full and equal citizenship. And then we offer peace and amity to all neighboring states and their peoples and invite them to cooperate with the independent Jewish state for common good of all. The state of Israel is ready to contribute its full share. I want people to understand that this is what we're fighting for. To end, I want to come back to my friend Avram. So actually 2 friends, Avram first. So I asked Avram, my one question was, come on, Avram, you really mean people on top had no idea what was going on? I mean, were they really giraffes? So I'd asked this question to a number of people, because I'm often asked that question when I guide, and his answer, I think, was the best one I've ever gotten. He says, what are you talking about? Of course, everybody knew something was going on. You just was smart enough not to ask. There are certain things when you know something is happening that you simply keep your mouth shut and you don't ask. And he really believes that many people who were technically giraffes really knew there was something going on, and they simply knew it's none of my business, that clearly something vital is happening, and I'll know about it if I have to know about it, but the best interests are by my keeping shut. The other person that I want you to meet is a person who became a friend of mine about 5 years ago. Her name is Tzipi Porath. She is a veteran of 1948, the War of Independence, fought with the Haganah in Yerushalayim. She comes from America. She was at Hebrew University on a graduate program when in the fall of 1947, when the UN partition plan was voted, most of her friends went back to the US. She decided to stay. Eventually, she joined the Haganah, and she fought in the War of Independence. And she wrote a book, which, here it is, Letters from Jerusalem, 47-48, highly recommended. She just had her 96th birthday about 2 months ago or 3 months ago. I've been taking groups to her frequently, even after leaving Keshe. I brought many Keshe groups after I'd met her. I've brought families, as you saw on the previous slide. And I want to end with something in Tzipi's book with which she always ends, because I think this is the story of Machon Ayalon as well. All right, the story of the letters that make up the book were these. It's the diary, the letters that she sent back to her family in 1947-48. And she discovered 40 years later, when she went back for Shiva for her mother, that her mother had saved them all in a file. And she decided to put them into a book. Again, I'm going to go back to the slide because I really highly recommend. It's available on Amazon. Letters from Jerusalem, 1947-48, Tzipora Porath. And again, this is how she ends her book, as well as her presentations to our groups. When I wrote the letters were produced in this book, I didn't expect to be reading them 40 years later. In my wildest reveries, I was growing up in New York. I never imagined that I would see the Zionist dream of a Jewish state materialize in my own lifetime, or that I could personally take part in making it come true. Nor could I have anticipated the wondrous achievements of the state, nor the changes, some of them troubling, that have marked its development. I cannot really be objective after all these years of living at boiling point in a melting pot with the tensions, frustrations, and irritations of everyday life, and the constant turmoil of wars and their aftermath. For me, they're part of life here, part of the challenge. People today, especially young people, sometimes forget that only a few short decades ago, there was no Jewish state. No Israel, it didn't exist. They take it for granted. But for those of us, I kind of tear when I'm saying this right now, but for those of us who were privileged to take part in its birth, Israel will always have a special aura. It was a turning point, not only in the history of our people, but in our personal lives as well. When I discovered in my first year here is still true, I belong here. This is my home. I'm still a starry-eyed optimist who believes that whatever we do here as individuals is meaningful. Wow, we count just by being here, helping to bring closer the dream of a better Israel. My personal commitment to Israel, to this country, is still a source of personal satisfaction. Then as now, I know I am here. So this I hear often from the words of a 96-year-old woman who helped bring about Israel, who probably used some of the bullets that were manufactured at Machon Ayalon. I hope it's been informative and interesting. It's been a pleasure to be a part of this amazing group that we're in. Look forward to some of the other amazing things, Judy, that you've had prepared for us. And thank you all for being here today.
Thank you very much.
Peter. It was outstanding.
Thank you. It was very interesting.
Thank you, Peter.
Yes, I just want to, I want to add a few things. One thing is, for those who have O Jerusalem, I suggest, I encourage my tourists, I encourage fellow tour guides to read, I believe it's chapter 4, where it talks about Ehud Avriel and Chaim Slavin. Both of them, Ehud Avriel was sent by Ben Gurion with $1 million to procure machines to make weapons. And Chaim Slavin had had acquired a lot of the machines. He read journals about exactly how the machines operate. And all the machines were sent to a farmhouse, and he dismantled each machine, put them back together, realized he could do it without missing a single screw or bolt, and then dismantled them and shipped them to Eretz Yisrael. And it's a nice addition, I think, when I guide there. Okay. Peter, thank you very much. This was great. And we have at 4:30 today, we have another fantastic lecture with Gil Regev. So hope everyone will join in then.
And thank you again to Judy for your massive effort to make this happen, Judy.
Okay. All right. All the best,
Bye
guys.
all.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Judy.